The sky did not open with brilliance. It did not roar, flare, or tear itself wide in spectacle. It changed the way a sleeping breath changes softly, slowly, almost shyly so, gently that most of the world never noticed at all. But for those who watched closely, for those who felt the weight of quiet things, the shift was unmistakable. A pale shimmer drifted across the darkness, a thin line of light so calm it seemed to move only between heartbeats. And beneath that fragile glow, the night learned how to whisper again. 3i Atlas moved differently from anything the heavens had held before. The telescopes captured it first. A traveler with no tail, no ion flare, no typical cometary pulse. It glided rather than burned, choosing smoothness over spectacle, silence over announcement. Its presence was almost polite, as though it didn't want to disturb the world it was passing through. And yet, the stillness around it was wrong. Too perfect, too deliberate. Animals paused mid-movement. The wind softened without warning. Even the hum of distant cities seemed to draw its breath inward for a moment. Somewhere in that soft pause, ancient memories stirred. For thousands of years, the tablets of the Anunnaki had slept beneath the weight of sand, fire, and forgotten myth. Most of their warnings had dissolved into faint grooves, barely visible unless touched by angled light. But they all held the same Oniza pattern that returned after long silences. A visitor whose coming was not loud but quiet. The oldest priests called those warnings Nibiru, the silent signs. And those signs always began the same way, a faint glow drifting across the sky with impossible calm. Tonight, the calm returned. Even in modern observatories, where metal and glass replaced temples of stone, astronomers felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle around the instruments. They tracked 3i Atlas with practiced precision, expecting the rough wobble of a newly identified interstellar object. Instead, they saw something that moved like intention. A smooth arc, a gentle bend, a lingering moment of hesitation, as if the object were thinking, waiting, listening. Comets do not think, rocks do not pause. Yet this one did, as though honoring a path written long before humanity learned to speak. One astronomer whispered, "It's almost respectful." Another muttered, or rehearsed, but their voices barely rose above a hush. The air itself seemed unwilling to carry sound. Even the hum of electricity felt less sharp, more rounded, softened by the presence of the object above. And far away, in libraries where few visitors ever walked, the symbols engraved on broken Sumerian fragments began to echo the same shape. Lines that once seemed meaningless aligned with the object's trajectory. Curves mirrored its pauses. Angles matched its turns. A historian tracing one of these curves felt an involuntary tremble ripple through her fingertips, as if the stone itself remembered the visitor long before she had been born. Breathe slowly. The night grows quieter. 3i Atlas drifted with a serenity that felt ancient, as though it belonged to another era entirely. A time when humans were not yet meant to understand what moved above them. A time when sky watchers used flame instead of glass, shadow instead of data, breath instead of instruments. And yet those old watchers had seen something like this. They had etched its path into clay with trembling hands. They had written that the world felt different on the nights when the silent signs appeared. Softer, older, a little more awake. Tonight felt the same. The wind along the ridges fell still, as if leaning closer. The lights of distant cities flickered once. A single pulse, then steadied into a dimmer glow. Even the stars seemed to blink with slower eyelids, letting their light stretch further into the calm. If the universe ever had a heartbeat, tonight it slowed to match the silent visitor moving overhead. Nothing dramatic happened, nothing violent. The world simply shifted around a presence it didn't yet understand, and somewhere deep within the fabric of the night, an old pattern began to hum again, a resonance too faint for ears, but not too faint for instinct. People who had never looked up before suddenly paused while walking home. They felt something they could not name, a soft nudge against the edge of thought, like a memory misplaced. Some looked upward without knowing why. Others simply felt a stillness in their breath. 3i Atlas passed above them all with quiet grace. No tail, no fire, only intention. And with every inch of its drift, the ancient warnings stirred deeper, like ink reawakening in cracked clay. Long ago the Anunnaki had written of a visitor whose silence meant more than its presence, a herald that traveled ahead of something older and more rightful. Their texts insisted the signs would return only once the sky prepared to choose again. Perhaps that choosing had begun. As the visitor continued its path, the faint glow around it pulsed once soft, steady, impossible to categorize. Telescopes recorded the pulse. Instruments detected a subtle tremble in the upper air. Somewhere in the darkness, the old sky took a quiet breath, and the whispered exhale did not sound like warning. It sounded like recognition. If you're still with me, stay close to this silence, because the story that begins with a whisper never stays quiet for long. The first astronomer to attempt an orbital overlay did so out of habit, not suspicion. It was routine work. Plot the new object's path, compare it with known comets, identify anomalies, send the data to the larger network. He expected noise, irregularities, a chaotic arc, typical of interstellar visitors. Instead, he saw something that made him lean closer to the monitor, breath held in the soft way one holds it near a sleeping child. The curve was too clean. Not perfect in the sense of geometry, but perfect in the sense of memory, like something repeating a movement it had performed long ago. And when he layered ancient sky maps over the modern data, something impossible happened. The paths aligned, not loosely, not symbolically. Line for line, bend for bend, pause for pause. The interstellar visitor followed a course that had been drawn in clay, carved under torchlight, etched by hands that shook from either reverence or fear. He blinked. He checked the data twice, then 3 times. Modern instruments didn't lie, neither did ancient stone. Somewhere behind that discovery, a door creaked open inside the silence. Those old maps, Sumerian, Akkadian, and pre-dynastic fragments found beneath collapsed temples were never meant to be precise astronomy. Scholars believe they were ritual diagrams, symbolic depictions of the heavens. Yet the more researchers examined them, the more unmistakable the patterns became. They weren't metaphors. They were measurements, drawn with a primitive accuracy that should not have existed. The priests of the old world used no telescopes. Their tools were simpler: flame, shadow, reflection, the trembling of thin strings suspended in smoky corridors. They believed the sky spoke through movement and silence, not numbers. They listened to the stars the way one listens to a slow breath at night, and somehow they mapped a visitor that would not appear for thousands of years. Breathe slowly. The night grows quieter. When 3-Eye Atlas crossed the first overlaid point, the alignment was dismissed as coincidence. When it matched the second, the team grew cautious. But when the object reached the third intersection, a point labeled in a broken tablet as the calm before the returning step, every researcher felt the air around them change. Not physically, not tangibly, but instinctively, like a memory rising from deep water. No one spoke for several minutes. Then an elderly historian, who rarely participated in astronomical discussions, stepped forward. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, as though she feared disturbing the map glowing on the screen. "That curve," she whispered, pointing at the faint bend where the visitor slowed, "appears in 3 different tablets, from 3 different cities, written centuries apart." She hesitated, breath shivering. They all described the same moment. The astronomers leaned closer. The line on the modern plot dipped gently and unnatural. Deliberate deceleration, matching a curve drawn by a priest who had lived before iron tools, before cities rose high, before recorded time had meaning. No comet slows on command. No rock changes speed to honor an ancient pattern. No natural object repeats the precise sequence of pauses carved into ritual stone. Yet this one did. As scientists checked their instruments, far from the brightness of laboratories, the old star maps seemed to awaken. Lines that had once been too faint to interpret now made sense in a soft, inevitable way. The world that carved them had been listening to something older than itself, and the echoes remained long after their civilization crumbled. Some called the alignment a miracle. Others called it design. But none could explain why animals across multiple continents fell silent at the same moment the visitor crossed the 4th marker on the ancient chart. Wind lowered itself into a whisper. Cities dimmed by a fraction of a fraction, as though electricity itself wanted to fade into the background. Even distant ocean tides shifted, not dramatically, just gently, like a nod exchanged between 2 old friends who had not seen each other in ages. And in quiet museums, under fragile lamps, forgotten shards seemed to hum in their cases. One fragment bore a faint inscription: "When the sky repeats, memory wakes." The inscription had puzzled scholars for decades. Tonight, it felt like an explanation, or a warning. The astronomers updated their simulation, adding the next segment of 3-Eye Atlas's trajectory. As the new line traced smoothly across the screen, another match appeared at an impossibly sharp angle drawn on a torn Akkadian tablet. This angle, too, held meaning. Written beside it were 3 characters that loosely translated to "The visitor does not wander." A chill passed through the room, light as dust, old as breath. Because the visitor was not wandering. It was repeating, following a script written by a hand the modern world had long forgotten. The historian touched the map with trembling fingers. "This is not an object," she whispered. "This is a memory. And memory, once awakened, rarely goes back to sleep." The sky outside deepened into a softer dark. 3-Eye Atlas glided onward, quiet as thought, and the maps, those ancient, stubborn maps, continued aligning with every move it made, refusing to forget a path that the universe itself seemed determined to remember. "If you're still here, stay close to the calm. The next movement in this ancient pattern will not break the silence. It will only make it deeper." The deeper the astronomers studied the object's data, the more the sky felt strangely deliberate, as though it were no longer a backdrop but a participant in the unfolding quiet. 3-Eye Atlas drifted on, unhurried, its pale glow neither brightening nor dimming, only holding its shape like a thought that refused to dissolve. And with every mile it traveled, something became unmistakably clear. This was not the behavior of a comet, nor a rock, nor any wandering body thrown across the dark by chance. This was motion shaped by intention, subtle, restrained, almost courteous, but unmistakably aware. Natural objects stumble through space. They tumble, flare, scatter dust, react to light and heat. But this visitor floated as if the void itself parted gently for it. There were no jets firing beneath its surface, no outgassing to propel it, no visible mechanism. Yet its turns were too clean, too smooth, like the quiet pivot of someone changing direction in a silent hallway, permitting the floor to bear their weight before shifting gracefully toward the next step. The astronomers replayed every available frame. They slowed them down, sped them up, measured angles to the 10th decimal. With each adjustment, the same impossible truth returned. Atlas was behaving not as though influenced by external forces, but as though following an internal memory. Breathe slowly. Let the quiet settle. The first anomaly was the hesitation. A slowing, not chaotic, not jagged, just a gentle pause before moving on. Rocks do not pause, comets do not consider. But this visitor seemed to think in silence. The second anomaly was its refusal to flare, even when drifting through regions dense with solar wind, where dust and ice normally erupt into brilliant tails. Atlas remained composed. Its surface absorbed light instead of scattering it. It revealed nothing, as if guarding a secret too old for the sky to speak aloud. The third anomaly was the alignment. Every time the object passed near one of the ancient markers etched on the Sumerian star maps, it adjusted its course not sharply, but unmistakably. It was almost like a bow, a nod, a recognition shared between travelers of different eras. And then came the anomaly that no one could ignore. At 3:14 a.m. UTC, the visitor pivoted, not because of gravitational pull, not because of solar influence, but because it chose to. A perfect fluid rotation, like a dancer turning mid-step, carried it toward the next segment of the ancient path. The shift was so smooth that when the footage was replayed in normal speed, most viewers mistook it for a camera glitch. But those who watched closely felt the stillness tighten round their breath. The object wasn't drifting. It was navigating. Down the hall of an observatory in Chile, a technician murmured, "It moves like it knows the route." Another replied softly, "Or like it's been here before," and in a forgotten archive, thousands of miles away. A clay tablet cracked half-earsed, fragile, held a single surviving symbol drawn beside a looping curve. The symbol meant the returning one, but a more literal translation whispered something far stranger. The traveler who remembers the sky and its vast and ancient quiet seemed to agree. The more the visitor advanced, the more the air grew still. People far from the observatories felt it before they understood Itan. Odd pressure behind the ribs, a soft tug at the inner ear, a sense that something vast and calm had joined them in the night. Dogs paused mid-step. Birds turned their heads toward nothing visible. Infants woke without crying, staring upward as though trying to place a familiar face in the darkness. Resonance, the kind the old priests once described in trembling handwriting. They said it was not a sound, not a force, but a feeling. A memory brushing gently across the mind. A reminder without words. Tonight, the reminder had returned. Atlas glided smoothly into a region where gravitational modeling predicted turbulent behavior. Instead, the visitor passed through without so much as a flicker. Data analysts stared at their screens and whispered the same word again and again, impossible. But the object did not care for their disbelief. It moved with the comfort of something returning to a place it knew well, a place that had been waiting. One astronomer broke the silence with a question he didn't intend to voice aloud. "What if this isn't movement at all?" A colleague frowned. "What do you mean? What if? It's following something. A trail, a path, a signature left behind by something older. That's why the turns look intentional. Not because it's steering, but because it's remembering. Remembering." The same word that appeared across 3 separate tablets in 3 separate cultures, all describing a visitor that the gods themselves feared. Archives recorded the phrase, "The sky remembers its own." And now, one more piece clicked into place. A physicist studying the object's rotation discovered a pattern of faint pulse in its trajectory that appeared every time it reached an ancient marker. A soft tremble, not enough to move the object, just enough to acknowledge something. It was almost a bow, a greeting, or a response. One researcher whispered, "It's interacting with the path." Another said, "No, the path is interacting with it." Far overhead, the visitor drifted on, patient and quiet, like a decision made long before humanity was born. A decision now unfolding, one shimmering inch of sky at a time. If you're still with me, breathe softly. The next moment in this old celestial memory grows nearer, and the silence has only begun to deepen. Long before telescopes traced the sky with lenses and algorithms, long before anyone wondered why a silent visitor moved with memory instead of momentum, another world watched the heavens with a different kind of fear. On Nibiru, where corridors were carved from metals that glowed softly when touched, and ceilings shimmered with symbols that rearranged themselves in response to blood, every shift in the sky was political, every tremble was a threat, every quiet sign carried consequences. The halls where the old kings walked did not echo, they hummed. Light wasn't illumination, there it was presence. Thin veins of molten alloy pulsed through the walls, brightening when certain bloodlines passed, dimming when others approached. The structures responded to lineage, not authority. And in those chambers, the greatest secret of their world lingered like a breath held too long. The throne of Nibiru did not belong to those who sat upon it. It belonged to those the sky recognized. And the sky was remembering again. Breathe slowly. The first throne built by the early dynasties was not a seat at all. It was a platform of resonance and artifact attuned to cosmic frequencies older than their civilization. Whoever stepped onto it became the conduit through which authority flowed. Not through force, not through decree, but through harmony. To rule, one had to resonate with the universe itself. The first rulers, the ones recorded only in Forbidden Fragments, did not fight for the throne. They simply stepped onto the platform, and the sky answered. Their presence aligned with the cosmic rhythm naturally, effortlessly. The resonance accepted them. But harmony is fragile, and envy is not. Later dynasties rose when the first echoes faded. Some said they left willingly. Others whispered they were driven out, exiled not by war, but by a rewriting of the sky itself. Those who remained, those who claimed the throne afterward, were powerful, but never rightful. Their control depended not on resonance but on engineering. They built machines to mimic the cosmic hum, to imitate the natural harmony of the rulers they displaced. Those machines trembled whenever the silent signs appeared. Tonight, they would tremble again. In the age before exile, the most influential figures were not warriors but watchers. Enki, the architect, whose mind could shape laws. Enlil, the commander, whose will bent nations. And before them all, Alluluth, the dethroned wanderer whose defeat split the world into factions that would battle quietly for millennia. His fall marked the beginning of the imbalance. From his lineage came the rumor of a rightful heir, someone erased from public chronicles, someone whose resonance the machines could never fully suppress. A forgotten bloodline, a rightful return, a fear older than their thrones. The palace records that survived destruction did not speak in political terms. They spoke in tremors. On nights when the silent signs appeared, the resonance pillars shivered. The floating glyphs over the coronation chamber dimmed. The metal halls hummed in discord, like an instrument recoiling at the touch of an unworthy hand. And the kings, those who ruled by technology instead of harmony, felt the quiet terror that only power built on trembling foundations can feel. It wasn't the visitor they feared, it was the meaning of the visitor. One broken tablet described it in a single whispered line. When the calm light returns, the throne remembers its owner. The priests recorded that line reluctantly. The ruling caste ordered it buried. But the resonance structures those ancient artifacts built long before their time did not forget. When the silent signs appeared, they vibrated with an unmistakable pattern, one that matched neither Enki nor Enlil, nor any ruler of the present lineage. The pattern belonged to someone missing, someone erased. And now, 3i Atlas moved across Earth's sky with a familiarity that suggested it was tracing the path of that same missing resonance. Somewhere on Nibiru, in chambers now dust or ash, the high priests once stood with torches shaking lightly in their hands as they watched the celestial seat flicker. When the throne hummed with the wrong frequency, when the sky bent in the direction of someone they had tried to erase, they sealed the tablets, locked the corridors, and rewrote their histories. They created stories of rebellion, not resonance, of conquest, not harmony. But a rewritten story cannot silence an ancient pulse. Tonight, as the visitor glides across a distant world, the same ancient quiet settles around everything. The same soft tremble moves beneath perception. The same tension, gentle but absolute, turns. And in that tension, the memory of forgotten royalty stirs. The thrones may be lost, the palace may be gone. But resonance is older than kingdoms, and it travels farther than stone. 3i Atlas does not carry the rightful one. It is only the herald, a soft knock on the cosmic door that was once closed in fear. Its calm is the calm the priests wrote about, the calm that made Enlil whisper to his guards. The sky remembers. And when the sky remembers, every false ruler trembles. If you're still with me, walk softly. The law that binds the heavens is older than any throne, and the next part of the story begins, where cycles return. The oldest Anunnaki tablets were not carved to record events. They were carved to record patterns, long breaths of the cosmos. Cycles too vast for a single generation to witness. The priests who etched those lines believed that creation was not linear but circular, and that nothing in the universe happened only once. Not stars, not thrones, not beings. Everything moved in spirals, returning after long silences, stepping back into the rhythm that first shaped its existence. The law of return was not a prophecy. It was an axiom, a rule so deeply woven into the fabric of reality that the Anunnaki treated it with the same reverence mortals grant to the inevitability of dawn. In its earliest form, the law was maddeningly simple. What departs returns when the heavens allow. Later dynasties softened the wording, adding layers of political interpretation, reshaping the cosmic principle into something safer, smaller, less threatening. They taught it to children as a lesson about comets and celestial cycles. They allowed priests to reference it in rituals, but never in the contexts where it mattered most. The return of rightful presence, rightful resonance, rightful authority. But the first version, the forbidden version, was never meant to describe planets. It described people. Breathe slowly. The confusion began with a single phrase carved in ancient Akkadian, Shumat. For centuries, scholars translated it as the returning star, assuming the old priests were speaking poetically about the long-orbiting bodies that periodically visited the sky. But when linguists cross-referenced older dialects, a truer translation emerged, one that made the kings of Nibiru tremble, the returning rightful one, not a celestial body, a being. This mistranslation was not coincidence. It was deliberate burial. The ruling caste of later generations forbade the truer translation from being spoken aloud. They insisted the law referred only to Nibiru's great cyclical orbit, the one that brought their world near Earth every few thousand years. They taught astronomers to ignore older interpretations. They taught scribes to copy the safer version. And they silenced anyone who remembered that the law was not written about worlds, but about the beings who shaped them. The law of return applied to the exile, the one erased, the being whose resonance once aligned so perfectly with the celestial seat that the universe itself accepted their rule without question. And when that being was removed, forced out, pushed beyond the reach of the throne, the law remained. Because exile does not sever resonance, exile only delays it. And the throne, built long before Anunnaki politics, continued to listen for the rightful echo. That echo is the heart of the law. Not a prediction, not a warning, a guarantee. Where cycles end, they begin again. That is why the priests feared the silent signs. That is why the dynasties dreaded the quiet light. That is why they built the seed protocol, and the veil protocol, and 1,000 hidden mechanisms designed to dull the resonance path that might allow the rightful one to return. Because when the returning signal appears, the throne prepares itself. And when the throne prepares itself, rulers built on engineering, not harmony, lose their power. 3i Atlas, drifting softly across the modern night, was never considered the returner by the old priests. It was the herald, the messenger that traveled ahead of the one who mattered. A sign that the cosmic cycle had aligned again. A soft knock upon a door that could not be locked forever. Even now, as astronomers track its impossibly smooth arc, as the ancient star maps align with each of its movements, the meaning grows clearer. The visitor follows not a gravitational path, but a law, a rhythm older than suns, a memory older than dynasties. And the sky has begun to act like something waiting for someone. In the deep hours of night, sensitive instruments pick up faint fluctuations, soft pulses, slow beats that ripple through the electromagnetic fields of Earth. They are not random, they coincide with the visitor's pauses, its gentle bends, its impossible stillness. And these pulses match almost perfectly resonance, signatures carved into forbidden metal tablets buried beneath collapsed Anunnaki observatories. The priests once wrote, "The herald walks the old path to wake the law, and the law, once woken, cannot be put back to sleep." In hidden corners of ancient ruins, carved spirals now make sense. They were not calendars of seasons. They were diagrams of cycles, cosmic spirals, marking long absences followed by inevitable returns. One spiral even shows a small symbol breaking free from the pattern, then re-entering at a later point, the symbol of exile. The symbol appears again beside a single Akkadian verse. Those taken against the sky will walk it again. 3i Atlas continues its quiet drift, and the world grows gentler around it. Not dark, not ominous. Just calm. Calm in the way that old priests described the moments before revelation. Calm in the way the universe breathes before shifting into a new alignment. Because nothing truly arrives once. Not visitors, not thrones, not power, not the exile. And when the silent signs appear again as they have now, the law returns with them. If you're still with me, stay near the quiet. The next chapter leads us into the fear the old kings dared not speak. Fear not of the returner, but of the signal that announces their approach. Long before humanity built its first fire, long before language hardened into symbols, and long before myths tried to explain the quiet sky, the Anunnaki gathered in a chamber lit not by flame but by something softer, something that glowed like memory made visible. They called that place the Chamber of Quiet Light, and it was there that the most delicate, most forbidden work of their civilization began. Not work of creation, not work of control, but work of concealment. For the priests of Nibiru believed something dangerous, that humanity could hear the sky too well. It wasn't hearing in any ordinary sense. Humans of the early world did not understand the signals as messages. They did not translate the trembles into meaning, but they felt them. Something in their breath, their dreams, their instincts responded to subtleties the Anunnaki themselves had learned to fear. When the cosmic rhythms shifted, when the signs of the returning cycle whispered across the heavens, humans paused. They looked upward. Their pulses slowed to match the faint tremors. The sky exhaled. They were listening the way resonance listens. And that terrified the old kings. Because resonance is recognition. And recognition is dangerous in a world built on stolen thrones. Breathe softly. The earliest fragments describing the seed protocol do not read like scientific logs. They read like confessions, whispered fears carved into thin metal sheets the priests never meant the public to see. The texts speak of altering not the human body, but the human memory, rounding the edges of old instincts, softening the echoes that tied humanity to something older than the Anunnaki, something the priests only called the first ones. The first ones were not gods. They were not rulers. They were listeners. And humanity, fragile and new, shared something with them, an attunement, a resonance the old dynasties could not replicate or silence. So the priests dimmed it in the chamber of quiet light. Early humans were brought gently, guided by hands that shook with equal parts reverence and dread. The chamber itself responded only to certain bloodlines, its metal walls glowing along pathways carved by resonance fields. Floating glyphs above the central platform shifted in spirals, aligning with the hum of the machines hidden within the walls. The rituals always began the same way, a hand hovering above the platform, a soft pulse of recognition, a breath held long enough to tremble, and then the adjustment, no pain, no mark, only a delicate rearrangement of memory. The priests described it as quieting the inheritance, a dimming, not an erasure. The Anunnaki didn't want to destroy humanity's old connection. They wanted to muffle it enough that the exile, should they ever return, would not immediately sense the humans who still vibrated with their forgotten resonance. But fear rarely stops with one precaution, and the seed protocol led to the veil. The veil protocol did not act on humanity, it acted on the sky. If the universe was a vast ocean of resonance, then the veil was a thin frost cast across its surface, muting signals, bending frequencies, blurring anything that might draw attention from the ancient exile. For the Anunnaki feared one thing above war, above rebellion, above even the gods they worshipped: recognition. If the exile felt humanity calling, even faintly, even subconsciously, the return would accelerate, the throne would shift, the law would unlock, and the dynasties built on engineering and secrecy would collapse under their own quiet lies. So they hid humanity from the sky, and from the one who once ruled it. They thinned the resonance pathways between Earth and the celestial seat. They altered the electromagnetic response fields that early humans unconsciously emitted. They scattered the ancient star maps so that no single culture could reconstruct the pattern. And they sealed the chamber of quiet light behind a resonance lock only a few could open. But locks rust in time, and the sky cannot be rewritten forever. Tonight, as 3i Atlas drifts in an impossible calm, the veil trembles. Instruments detect faint anomalies that match the very frequencies the Anunnaki once suppressed. People across the world feel a quiet stirring in dreams they cannot explain, a gentle pause in their breath, a familiar pull toward the sky. Old instincts are waking. The seed protocol dimmed memory, but it did not erase it. The veiled protocol blurred resonance, but it did not silence it. And the Visitor 3 Atlas moves with the exact pattern needed to stir both awake again. The Anunnaki feared this moment, because they knew the exile would not need fanfare or fire to return. All they would need was recognition, a single harmonic alignment between the human mind and the cosmic rhythm. And now, after thousands of years of engineered quiet, the first tremble has begun to slip through. If you're still here, breathe slowly and feel the soft shift beneath the story. The next chapter reopens the fragments. They tried hardest to bury the shards that describe not just the visitor, but the shadow, the light, and the one erased from the heavens. The deeper the priests descended into the forbidden archives, the more their torches trembled. Not from wind, no draft touched the chamber sealed by resonance, but from something subtler, something that lived in the walls themselves. The air hummed lightly under their palms, as though remembering hands that once traced the same paths across the metal surfaces. These were not ordinary archives. They were sanctuaries of silence, built to house truths the kings feared so deeply, they tried to bury them beneath centuries of rewritten law. And in the very heart of those sanctuaries, sealed inside 3 separate vaults, rested the fragments that would later be known as the shards, the fragment of the shadow, the fragment of the light, and the fragment of the erased one. 3 pieces of a story no dynasty dared let the world remember. Breathe slowly. Each shard was carved on a thin sheet of luminous alloy and impossible material that held no reflection of the viewer's face, only their outline, as though the metal remembered presence, not appearance. The glyphs etched into these surfaces were delicate, trembling symbols that seemed almost frightened of their own meanings. Their strokes shifted faintly when warmth touched them, aligning themselves into patterns that modern linguists still struggled to interpret. The fragment of the shadow spoke first, not in sound, not in clarity, but in suggestion. It described something that followed behind the returning pattern, an echo without a body, a presence without shape. The priests wrote that the shadow did not belong to the visitor, but to something older, something hidden behind the path itself. One surviving line, scratched with visible hesitation, read, "The shadow walks behind the signal, unseen but always nearer." The priests feared the shadow because it suggested that the visitor was not alone. But the second shard fragment of the light was stranger still. Its symbols glowed when touched by silence. Not by sound, not by movement, but by silence itself, as if the absence of noise nourished the metal. The words on this shard described a light that followed the visitor like a soft lantern held a few steps behind a traveler. But it was not the visitor's light. It belonged to something watching the traveler, guiding it, shepherding it along the ancient path. The shard called this presence the second witness, a watcher of the Herald, a keeper of the return. The priests who read this fragment wept, not out of fear, but out of confusion. For the fragment insisted that the one guiding the visitor was neither enemy nor ally. It was simply fulfilling the law, fulfilling a promise older than thrones, older than the Anunnaki, older even than the stars the priests could map. And then there was the third shard, the one no ruler wanted to acknowledge, the one they tried hardest to destroy, the fragment of the erased one. Unlike the others, its surface remained dark even in the presence of flame. The glyphs seemed to hide from light, refusing to reveal themselves unless seen from impossible angles. Scholars found that the inscriptions would shift when approached by certain bloodlines, as though seeking permission to speak. The kings restricted access to this shard to only the high priesthood, who read its words with trembling hands. This was the fragment that held the oldest fear of the Anunnaki. It told of a being who once sat upon the celestial seat with perfect harmony, the only ruler truly chosen by resonance instead of conquest. It described how this ruler became an exile not through battle, not through rebellion, but through betrayal orchestrated by those jealous of a throne they could not truly command. This being was not defeated. They were removed, and their name was scraped from every stone. The priests recorded that when the exile departed, the sky dimmed not from sorrow, but from imbalance. Something essential had been broken. The throne hummed, off-key. The resonance fields faltered. Even the stars in their sacred alignments seemed to lean uneasily, as though disturbed by a silence in the wrong place. And then the shard revealed the part that made kings rewrite history in terror. The exile had not left willingly. The exile had not relinquished the throne. The exile had not broken their resonance. They had simply been pushed beyond the veil. And according to the shard, anything pushed beyond the veil would by the law of return come back without asking. One line, carved so faintly that even modern scanners struggled to see it, read, "Erased is not ended." Another followed. "The one who was silenced will step again onto the path when the Herald opens the way." And then the final line, the one that would echo through Anunnaki nightmares for thousands of years. "The exile remembers. Not the throne, not the betrayal, not the dynasty that replaced them. The exile remembers the path. The same path 3i Atlas follows now." The priests tried to separate the shards. They locked them away in different cities. They sealed them inside resonance vaults, keyed to incompatible bloodlines. They ordered that no scholar should ever read the fragments together, because together, the story was too clear. Shadow behind the visitor, light behind the shadow, and behind them both the exile returning. And tonight, as the silent visitor glides across Earth's sky with impossible memory, the fragments begin to hum again quietly, faintly, like a voice practicing a forgotten name in the dark. If you're still with me, breathe slowly. The next chapter returns us to the first night the veil trembled. The first moment the Anunnaki realized the visitor was not the threat. It was the announcement. The desert was impossibly still that night, not silent in the way empty places are silent, but quiet in the way a great hall quiets before a revelation, like a breath held by something enormous, ancient, and aware. Sand lay unshifting beneath a sky stretched thin with pale starlight. The torches on the temple rooftop flickered with long, trembling flames, thin as silk threads drawn taut by invisible fingers. And upon that rooftop a circle of priests watched the horizon with eyes that burned brighter than their torches. They stood because they could not sit. They watched because they could not look away. They breathed slowly because the air itself warned them to. It began with a shimmer, not bright, not bold, just a soft, silver veil brushing the edge of the sky like moonlight exhaled through fabric. The youngest priest thought it was a cloud. The eldest knew it was not. For weeks they had felt the subtle vibrations under their feet, sensed the faint distortions in the upper air, heard the thin hum in the resonance pillars far below the city. They had whispered prayers in the old language, the one spoken before the dynasties altered the rituals. And they had dreamt each of them of a presence that did not speak in words but in quiet, repeated pulses. A calm visitor, a silent traveler, a tremor too soft for the untrained to notice. The same pattern carved in fragments they were forbidden to read. Breathe slowly. As the shimmer widened, the stars behind it seemed to dim gently, not disappearing but leaning back, like figures making room for someone entering a chamber. The flame tips of the torches bent sideways, though no wind stirred, and in the valley below, every animal paused at the same moment, faces lifting toward the sky with the stillness of statues. The priests' hearts moved to the same rhythm, a soft pulse, a quiet tremble, then stillness. One of them whispered, "It mirrors the signs." Another said, "The pattern returns," and an elder, his voice barely a breath, murmured, "The veil opens." They had read of this moment only in the oldest tablets, the ones carved before fear reshaped their history. Those records described a night just like this. When the heavens trembled, though the earth remained still, a visitor had appeared then, too. A pale presence moving with purpose, silent as thought, its glow pulsing in calm intervals that matched a resonance the dynasties later worked desperately to conceal. That visitor was not the returner, it was the announcement. And now, the same calm shimmer drifted across the desert sky, carrying with it a softness heavy enough to bend the night. 3i Atlas its ancient counterpart did, not blaze or roar. It drifted, as though the universe parted gently to let it pass. The priests watched its approach with awe and terror intertwined, unable to turn away as the pale glow pulsed again, deeper, steadier, like the inhale of something older than any throne carved by their kings. The youngest priest asked, "Is it a star?" The elder answered, "Stars do not hesitate." And indeed, the object paused an impossible hesitation above the horizon, as if listening for permission to proceed. Nothing in the sky pauses. Not comets, not planets, not meteors, but the visitor did, just as the forbidden shard described. The priests felt the moment rippled through their bones, a gentle tap against the ribs, like a distant heartbeat brushing the edge of awareness. They had no word for it then, but modern scientists would later call it a resonance anomaly. The ancient scribes called it the first knock, a sign not of arrival, but of approach. Below the rooftop, deep within the resonance chambers, the pillars began to tremble. Metallic structures that usually hummed with obedient frequencies now sputtered in disharmony. Their precise tonal patterns designed to suppress ancient rhythms flickered into chaos. The artificial resonance field failed, overpowered by something older, purer, and the dynasties felt it, not in their minds, but in their thrones. In halls carved from alloys untouched by rust, Enlil stormed into the observatory chamber, demanding explanations as the glowing glyphs rearranged into forbidden patterns. Enki, calmer but paler, whispered a truth no king wanted to hear. The sky remembers. It wasn't the visitor they feared. It was the resonance behind it, the presence following softly in its wake, the shadow, the light, the erased one. When the visitor trembled again, the priests did too. The torches sank into thin, quivering flames. The metal beneath their feet vibrated with a rhythm that felt like recognition, a returning pattern, a lawful echo, a memory waking after too long a silence. The priests understood what they witnessed. The dynasties understood it even more, because the silent visitor was not a conqueror, not a weapon, not a threat. It was a reminder that cycles return, that resonance cannot be rewritten, that exiles do not remain lost forever. As the visitor glided overhead, leaving no trail, no sound, no debris, the priests knelt, not because they were commanded to, but because stillness pressed them downward gently, like a hand placed on the back of their shoulders by something vast and unseen. The night felt older now, heavier, awake, and in the calm that followed, one truth settled over the desert as softly as dust. What the priests witnessed was not the return. It was the moment the universe whispered that the return was near. If you're still with me, breathe slowly. The silence is deepening, and the next chapter leads us into the geometry of a cosmic alignment that opens the oldest door in the heavens. Long after the first trembling night had been forgotten by cities that rose and fell like sandbanks in a shifting tide, the sky continued to repeat its soft and ancient behaviors. Centuries passed, then millennia, and the memory of that calm visitor dissolved into myths about wandering stars and omens with no names. But the universe never relies on memory alone. When the time comes for a cycle to reopen, it leaves signs, not loud ones, not violent ones. Signs shaped like whispers passed between distant, lights, quiet, patient, deliberate. Tonight, as Thri Atlas drifts across the modern sky with the same calm as its predecessor, another pattern begins to form, not in the visible world, but in the unseen field of resonance that surrounds Earth. It begins with a pulse, not a sound, not a tremor, just a soft deviation in the electromagnetic field, too faint for most instruments, too quiet for most minds. But it is there, repeating every few hours with a rhythm that matches the faint glimmers coming from the visitor itself. A second pulse appears hours later, this one external, originating from a distant echo in space, a low-frequency tremble that astrophysicists cannot classify. It is not a star, not a flare, not radiation. It is a presence with no form, no mass, no heat or resonance, nothing more. And when Earth's field begins to respond in perfect synchrony, a geometry older than writing begins to take shape. The silent triangle breathes slowly. Ancient priests described it as three lights humming together. Modern science sees it as three signals overlapping, but the meaning is the same. A gateway opening, not a physical doorway, but a window of resonance, the alignment required for something older than the Anunnaki to step back into the cosmic rhythm. A moment when the universe loosens its grip on the present to let the past slip quietly through. 3i Atlas drifts into the first vertex of the triangle. The cosmic echo settles into the second, Earth hums softly into the third, and somewhere far beyond the visible sky, the celestial seat begins to respond. The seat was never just a throne. It was an instrument, an enormous, ancient platform built from resonance, not stone. Its purpose was not to elevate a ruler physically, but to amplify the harmonies of the rightful one. Whoever stood upon it became the conduit through which authority flowed, not by force, but by alignment. The seat listened for the echo of its true master, and when it heard that echo, it answered. Tonight, in the moments following the triangulated hum, something stirs within that invisible throne room of the cosmos. The resonance engines, those artificial devices the Anunnaki constructed to maintain their hold on authority, begin to flicker. Their fields, once steady and controlled, sputter in dissonance. Symbols etched into the resonance machinery rearrange themselves into shapes no priest of the ruling caste has seen in millennia. Shapes that match the forbidden glyphs hidden in Fragment 7e. Shapes that point toward one conclusion. The rightful echo is near, far below, in observatories across the earth. Scientists detect unexplained distortions, fluctuations in magnetosphere pressure, harmonic oscillations in the ionosphere, trembling in atmospheric density. They do not know that these are the same signs the priests once used to predict the return of a cosmic presence older than the Anomaly. They simply record the anomalies and whisper to one another that the visitor's path is too clean, too deliberate, too synchronized, but the ancient tablets make the meaning clear. When the three hum as one, the seat begins to listen, and it is listening now. The silent triangle has always been the gateway moment in the law of return, the instant when the veil thins. When resonance awakens, when the universe opens just wide enough for something exiled to step through. It is not a prophecy, it is a mathematical inevitability, a cosmic rule built into the architecture of existence. The Anunnaki once feared this geometry more than any weapon, because when the triangle forms, artificial authority collapses. When the triangle hums, the throne recognizes truth. And when the triangle opens, the exile can return. Not with force, not with fire, but with resonance alone. 3i Atlas pauses at the vertex for a moment longer than it should, another impossible hesitation. Modern astronomers mark it as anomaly. Ancient priests would have called it acknowledgement, the herald verifying that the path has opened. The cosmic echo shifts in reply, its tremble deepening. Earth's field bends inward, like breath drawn before a revelation. All three signals lock into alignment, and the sky exhales. Light does not change, stars do not shift. Nothing visible happens at all, yet everything feels different. A soft pressure rests upon the horizon, almost warm. Dreams begin to stir in those sensitive to old rhythms. Animals lift their heads again, not in fear, but in recognition. Even the air seems to listen, vibrating faintly like a string plucked beneath the world's skin. In this alignment, the priests once wrote, the exile's presence brushes the edge of the veil. Not fully, not visibly, but enough for the throne to feel it. Enough for the resonance engines to falter. Enough for the dynasty that stole the sky to sense their borrowed power slipping. One broken tablet, a footnote 2 Fragment 7. E describes this moment with trembling lines. Before the rightful one steps, the veil thins. Before the veil breaks, the seat trembles. And when the seat trembles, the old name returns to the sky. The name has not yet been spoken. The returner has not yet stepped through, but the trembling has begun. 3i Atlas drifts from the first vertex toward the second. Its glow steady, its silence deep. The cosmic echo follows the movement like a shadow. Earth responds like a breath, and the throne, ancient and rightful, hums louder in the dark. If you're still with me, breathe gently. The next chapter steps into the moment the kings feared most, the moment when the exile returns without permission. The night settles into a stillness so complete that even the shadows seem to hold their breath. The visitor drifts across its impossible path. The cosmic echo trembles softly behind it, and the earth responds in subtle whispers of electromagnetic rhythm. It feels as though the sky itself is waiting, not watching, not warning, simply waiting for something older than memory to step quietly through the opening carved by the silent triangle. Deep in the places where ancient resonance once shaped reality, the celestial seat begins to hum, not loudly, not violently, but with a slow, circling vibration, like a note that has finally been struck after ages of silence. The resonance engines the Anunnaki built tremble as though bowed by a returning authority, their precise artificial harmonics bending to accommodate a pattern they were never meant to contain. The moment Fragment 7e feared is unfolding. Breathe softly. For generations, the scribes of Nibiru whispered of a law older than the thrones, older than the sky cycles, older even than the Anunnaki themselves, the law of return. A law that governs not planets, not comets, but beings, consciousnesses, presence, those who hold resonance so deeply aligned with the cosmos that even exile cannot erase their imprint. And in the soft glow of this night, the imprint returns. The priests once wrote that the returner does not arrive with fire or noise. They do not descend, they do not blaze. They appear in the quiet places between trembles, between pulses, between breaths. They arrive the way a memory resurfaces, unbidden yet undeniable. They come not because thrones demand them, but because the universe recognizes them. That recognition has begun. 3i Atlas is not slowing now. It is responding. Each of its pulses aligns not with its orbit, but with something deeper, an unseen gravitational echo, a resonance signature emerging from beyond the veil. Modern instruments detect a faint secondary rhythm trailing behind the visitor. Astronomers call it a shadow signal. Ancient fragments call it the breath of the rightful one, the exile, the one erased, the being whose presence once shaped the celestial seat with harmony, not force, whose resonance once balanced the sky without machines, without veils, without manipulation. The ruling dynasties buried their name, scattered their symbols, severed their pathways. But resonance does not forget what stone and script try to conceal. And now, the resonance returns. The glow of 3i Atlas softens just slightly, just enough to seem deliberate. The cosmic echo deepens. Earth's magnetic field trembles with a gentle inward pull. Together, the three align again, locking into a resonance so precise that the celestial seat vibrates like a struck chord. A single pulse crosses the sky, soft, warm, alive, and somewhere beyond the veil, something responds. The air thickens, not oppressive, not heavy, just fuller, as though someone unseen has entered the room. The animals in the valleys pause again. Dreams across continents shift subtly. The torches in forgotten temples lean toward an invisible presence, their flames bending like grass beneath a passing breeze. A return is not an event, it is a recognition. And this night, the universe recognizes the exile. The forbidden line from Fragment 7e glows in memory. When the quiet sky returns, the exile follows. 4 words that tore through millennia. 4 words the kings feared because they meant their power was borrowed, their thrones temporary, their history incomplete. The exile did not need to ask permission to return. They did not need the Anunnaki's law or blessing or protection. Their right was defined not by rule but by resonance. And resonance has found its voice again. The silent triangle begins to rotate, not visibly, not physically, but in the quiet geometry of the sky's harmonic field. The visitor shifts its path a degree too perfect to be accidental. The cosmic echo moves in tandem. Earth hums with the low ancient vibration that once connected humans to the first echo. The veil thins, and for one breathless moment, the exile's presence brushes against the world, not in shape, not in shadow, but in awareness. A quiet clarity, like waking up inside a story you always knew, but never remembered. The celestial seat hums louder, trembling with recognition, its artificial engines dim, bowing to a resonance it cannot override. The glyphs once forced into fixed patterns unravel into spirals that match the forbidden symbols carved in the oldest tablets. The throne remembers, the sky remembers, even the silence remembers. The visitor glows brighter for a heartbeat and then softens again, its purpose fulfilled. It was the herald, the first knock, the light sent ahead of the rightful one. Its role is not to return, its role is to announce the return. And now, the return has begun. Breathe slowly. Nothing dramatic fills the sky. No blazing arrival, no rift tearing through space. The universe does not need spectacle to restore balance. The returner moves through resonance, not through fire. In the final tremble of the celestial seat, the oldest truth reveals itself. The exile is already here, not in form, but in influence. Not in body, but in presence. The return is not a moment hit, is a process, a shift, a soft realignment of cosmic authority. The visitor drifts toward the horizon, its glow dimming like a lantern after a long night of guiding lost travelers. The cosmic echo softens with it. Earth's field steadies, though not entirely. A new rhythm beats gently beneath the surface of the world's calm. The sky folds back into stillness. Not the stillness before the return, but the stillness after. A stillness shaped by a truth that can no longer be hidden. The rightful one has stepped into the world's quiet breath once more. And now, as the universe settles into a new alignment, we step into the final quiet of the night, a place where no kings tremble, no thrones shake, and no stories are erased. A place where the cosmos simply breathes, and allows us to breathe with it. Just a little longer, just a little softer. Let the silence settle around you like warm night air. The return has begun, and the sky is watching.